From Beyond Marketing, it's the 20-Minute Call, a podcast about the dreamers, boundary pushers, rebels, and champions of the skydiving industry. Each episode is a narrative journey highlighted by the highs, lows, and luck that the skydiving industry delivers, as told by the most influential people within the sport. If you've ever dreamed of becoming a skydiver, perhaps opening a drop zone, or becoming the next world champion, check out the 20-Minute Call hosted by me, James LeBarry. My guest today made her first jump at age 17 after persuading her mother to sign for permission and loaning her the required $40. Her father tried encouraging her in a new direction by paying for flying lessons. Of course, Cheryl Stearns fell in love with both activities and set her sights on success in both. And boy, did she succeed. Across her 50-year career, some of Cheryl's highlights include 33 national championships. She's a 2-time women's overall world champion in style and accuracy, a 3-time overall women's style and accuracy world military champion. She also holds 30 world records, has made over 22,000 jumps, the most of any woman in the world. She is the first female member of the U.S. Army Golden Knights. She's a Guinness World Record holder for the most parachute jumps in 24 hours by a woman, having made 352 jumps through the night in Rayford, North Carolina in November of 1995. During this endurance test, Cheryl added an additional challenge by aiming for a 5-centimeter target on each jump. Despite the cold and wind, Cheryl hit the target a record 188 times, 104 by day, 84 by night. She also has been awarded the Diplôme Leonardo da Vinci, the world's highest award in aerosports, for her unique achievements in skydiving. She was inducted into the International Skydiving Museum and Hall of Fame in 2010. In 2007, the Arizona Aviation Hall of Fame. She's received the Amelia Earhart Pioneering Achievement Award. Also, she was an American Airlines captain on the Airbus 319, 320, 321, and has flown over 75 different types of aircraft and has over 23,000 flying hours, and still counting. She's also received the National Aeronautic Association Wesley L. McDonald Distinguished Stateswoman and Statesman of Aviation Award. The NAA bestows this award to, quote, honor outstanding living Americans who, by their efforts over an extended period of years, have made contributions of significant value to aeronautics and have reflected credit upon America and themselves. Whew. Cheryl, I have goosebumps.
Thank you.
That is the longest resume I've ever probably read on this podcast also.
Well, thank you. It's 50 years is a long time too.
Yeah, how do you feel when you hear your resume?
You know, I look back and I didn't go after any awards or anything like that. I was just trying to, day by day accomplish what I needed to do, each goal of trying to win championships, mentor folks, but not even realizing I'm mentoring people. Then I get into the teaching aspect of it and trying to give back the knowledge that I have. So never realized I just wanted to go make one jump, never realized I could do 52 plus years actually, and still jumping at this age. Because back then, if you had 2,000 jumps, you were crippled because of the round parachute jumps, the type of equipment we jumped. But nowadays, the equipment we have, we can jump to, whatever age you're physically able to do it.
Cheryl, what I try to understand about you is your drive. You're very matter of fact. I've heard you say multiple times, there's no plan B. There's plan A. I'm going to go do that. There's no maybe another strategy that maybe it's going to be that or nothing. I mean, that's Michael Jordan. That's Kobe Bryant mentality thinking. But you were a gal from Arizona. Where did this drive come from?
I think it was more of maybe growing up in a society that women couldn't do what they wanted to do. I mean, I was in elementary school and in sixth grade, and we have career day, and they say, what do you want to be when you grow up, Cheryl? And the only options were a school teacher, a nurse, and a mother, and something else I can't remember. But it was four things, and I said I want to be what society doesn't want me to be, because none of those interested me whatsoever. I didn't know what I wanted to be, but I certainly knew I didn't want to be those four things. So wherever, it's like flying. I wore glasses, and they said you can never be a pilot. And, well, I said, well, somewhere down the road, something's going to change. So I just kept striving toward it. And I had to wear eyeglasses, and I finally found out you can get eye surgery. This is way before LASIK. This is RK. And got that. Got my eyes fixed, and then I ended up being an airline pilot. So it's just like, it's not like where someone says, oh, you can't do this, Cheryl. I go, well, I'm going to go prove you wrong. I've got to have the interest in it too, but I've never understood, prejudice or anything. If you wear glasses, or if you're left-handed, you can't do this. I mean, I don't care if we're pink, yellow, green, white, black, whatever we are. We're human beings. We can do what we wish to do, but I don't like anybody holding me back. That's the whole thing. And when I know I have the ability to do it, but I can't because of what society might say, or my age, my sex, whatever, that's where it's. Then I put 150% into it and go, I'm gonna prove you guys wrong, because there's no reason we should be held back. I mean, joining the military back then, it was like, well, as a woman, we can only do these jobs. We couldn't be a fighter pilot. We couldn't do this. Couldn't do that. Oh, yeah, we can be a transport pilot, but we couldn't go into all these. I wanted to be a ranger. I wanted to go to the ranger school. No, you can't go to ranger school because you're female. I think it's more of just like someone saying you can't do it when I know I really can do it. It was maybe where the drive comes from. And I want to do what I want to do. And what I do now in the flying and jumping is where I love it. I just love to do it. So I get more and more drive out of that, I guess.
It's very mature, like where you must have been mature beyond your years when you say, I want to do whatever society says that I shouldn't be doing. I mean, that's very mature at a very young age. There are many people that grow into societal norms that they don't even see that maybe there are other options. But you saw that, no, this doesn't fit me. I got to go do whatever it is that my heart is calling me to do. And
I believe so. And I think it's because I was around some adults, more adults than kids. If someone says the plate's hot, I don't need to test it and say, oh, let me try it out. My grandmother, I watched her, and she says, well, don't do this, don't do that. And I go, okay, she's lived long enough. I'm not going to go try that. Why waste my time? I don't like wasting time. I never have. I want to find the best, fastest route I can go. I didn't need to waste time, and I wanted to find the shortest possible thing to accomplish what I wanted to do. So, yeah, maturity in that. Maybe it was because my parents never put limits on me. Yeah, I had rules, be back by 10. I abided by them, but they let me have free reign of what I wished to do as long as it was safe, and I abided by their rules and their boundaries. And as long as I stuck within those boundaries, I was authorized to do what I wished to do.
I want to key on what you just said. You said, as long as what you were doing was safe.
Right.
But you made your first jump in the early 1970s, not even the safest period of skydiving.
And that's why my dad didn't have anything to do with it. But, a year of talking to my mother and, convincing her, and she knew I played safe. I don't like to get hurt. Do you think I like adrenaline? I don't like adrenaline whatsoever. I don't like anything that scares me. People say, oh, you like jumping because you like the adrenaline. No. Adrenaline means something's unsafe out there, something I don't have the confidence, I don't have the ability to do, and I do not like that feeling. For flying, I want nice and quiet. Jumping, I want a nice, quiet, easy, very controlled. That's the life where I want to live in, and that's where you're safe. You're within your boundaries. Now there comes a time you have to push that. And yes, I've had to push it to get better and better and better. Otherwise, you stay in that safety comfort life. And I don't want that. But there's ways of learning that you continue to be safe and stay on that safe side, taking lessons, whatever, getting a coach.
What was it that led you at age 17 to want to even make
that first jump? Let's go 120 miles an hour. I mean, I just had that curiosity of what it felt like to actually fly through the air. I wanted to know what it felt like. And if we had tandems back then, I'd have made one jump and I'd been done. It solved my curiosity. But because back in the days we were jumping like the military where we had static line, fell 8 feet and parachute open, and that was it. That's not what my curiosity was. Curiosity was of that full sensation of knowing what it felt like. And that took several jumps to go through. It took a month or two. And then at that time, around people, around adults, around military folks that are into the jumping there and talking to them and realizing I really like these group of folks out here. They come from all different lives, but they're all doing the same one thing, which is jumping. And they were very safe too. They were pilots, they were jumpers, there were all sorts of different jobs that they held, but they're very mature. There was no one taking chances out there, and that's kind of where I watched all that. But as I got into it, then I found out about the competition. I was a very competitive person. I grew up playing tennis, and I like to compete in anything and everything. If that means reading a book, what page are you on? I finish this book faster than you. I mean, I was that way when I was a kid. So I was competitive playing on the playground against my peers of tetherball or whatever I played out there. I was very competitive in all sports and stuff that I did.
If I recall, you were not just like dabbling in tennis. You were a very good tennis player.
I was an Arizona State champion in tennis for high school, and then also for my for 2-year college. I just went to a 2-year. I had a 4-year scholarship, but I didn't want to go 4 years because I wanted to get going on my career of flying. And so I accepted the 2-year at Scottsdale Community College. Then continued with my career of flying and jumping, and then going in the military. I finished out my college for my master's, bachelor's and master's.
I don't mean to sound cute, but is there anything that you've not excelled at in what you've tried?
No. If I put my mind to it, my heart to it, I will succeed in it. And my goal might take me 10 years, 15 years. And yes, I didn't succeed in the high altitude jump that I put into, but it wasn't meant to be. Couldn't get the money. Timing was bad. And, and that's all right. It's something I've always still want to do, but it's not there.
If you're a DZO or DZM listening to this podcast and you're not using Burble, I've got a question. Why not? If the reason is price, what's the cost of your time? Other booking and manifest softwares are a one-size-fits-all. Burble was built from the ground up by a DZO for DZOs to maximize efficiency. Now, isn't that nice? There's no software that compares. Choose Burble. Burble. This is very inappropriate, and my mother who's listening will not appreciate me asking this question. But if I may ask, Cheryl, how old are you?
I am 68, will be 69 in a few months. I was born in 55, so yeah, I'm still young. I mean, I look at people that are 40 and go, oh my God, you guys are old, but they're really not. Or 80. 80's not old now. I mean, I think of people, what I did at 40, no, we're still young. We're whatever your body is, and I still feel like I'm going to live to 105, and I'm going to have a full mind and a full body by that time. That's what I'm working at. That is another goal, is to stay healthy as long as I can. And yes, I don't know what comes down the road, but quality of life is important. Not quantity, but quality.
I imagine firstly, I asked you your age because you've had an over 50-year career in aviation, and you're still going. Mm-hmm. I was fortunate that that it's windy today, that you're not jumping right now. Right.
This year I plan on putting full effort into my skydiving and not as much into my flying, because last year was more flying than it was jumping. And I saw that I didn't do as well last year, and it was a struggle at each meet that I had to do, because you can't just go on your experience. You do have to get the cobwebs off and the dust and polish yourself up to perform against all these folks out here. It's tough.
So your mentality is you're not showing up to compete, you're showing up to win.
Yes, because I am competitive, and I have lost more than I've won, parachute meets. I also want to perform well. I know what my level is, and I don't want to go mediocre. That's an embarrassment to me. It's a disappointment, and it's a disappointment to my team. I mean, my team, I jump for my team, and then if I win individually, okay, I win individually. I think you can win more, do better if you jump for your team than if you jump individually. And you can have a team that's mediocre, but if you guys put that mind into it and they're performing very, very well because they cannot let the other person down. But if you're just performing for yourself, you're not likely not to win as well as you do jumping with a team.
So, of course, we're talking about accuracy.
Accuracy, any type of sport out there. And for me, yes, accuracy.
So if you're unhappy with your performance, are you sort of berating yourself and angry at yourself, or what's your mentality?
No, not really. Last year I got injured, a little bit, so I couldn't jump as much as I wanted to. And then what it does is it makes me now train harder like this year. It says, okay, now we got to step up. We got to step it up. We got to step up the plate. Either get out of the sport or step up. I cannot continue jumping mediocre. I just can't. That's not me. That's not me at all. I am there to perform well at the best of my ability. If someone out jumps me, fine. I can't control what they do, but I know what I can do, what I'm capable of doing. And that's what I've strived for is that it's hard now because if I could jump full time and train full time, there's not a person that could beat me out there. I'll guarantee you that. I'll guarantee you. If I got the full training that I would like to do and not have the interference of working a job or doing this or, involved in other things that you want to do, there's no stopping me. But then you've got to get to that point also of where do you burn out? I know myself very well, and after all these years, it's a mind over matter. Everybody can perform out there. It's just a matter of who's on top of the game. That means, do they eat well, sleep well? Are they mentally? It comes down to a mental game out there, because we can all shoot accuracy per se, but are you right on top of it right at the end? And what caused you not to be on top of it right at the end? How did you miss it by 1 centimeter, 2 centimeters? No matter what the wind conditions are, because you're just not 110% right there at that moment that you need to be. So what clicked on your mind there? What thought process went through, and why didn't you react just in time? So that comes all down to knowing your body well enough that eating well, sleeping well, and being tired, not having any interference at all through that whole week of that competition.
So at this point in your career, I assume, do you have a coach?
No, I coach myself. That's the problem. And I'll take any advice of anybody. I don't care if the guy's got 30 jumps out there. If he points something out to me, I'll take it to heart and go, well, he's not really knowing what he's talking about, or wow, he saw something I didn't think about. I'll take any advice. I'm willing to give the advice, and I'm willing to take the advice. And I might take a portion of it and throw the rest away. And I'd love to have a coach, but we kind of help each other out there. And me coaching helps. Me teaching someone. Like I'm going to teach a guy accuracy. He jumps out at Chester, John Davis, and that will help me. That helps me in my jumping. Not too many people at this day and age gets into accuracy. They're all into the head downs, the other stuff, and other type of disciplines that are out there. Accuracy is the old classic, as we say, because it's the first thing that came up. But somewhere you got to land, either on the airport, but doesn't mean you got to land on a 1 centimeter target or 2 centimeter target that we have now. But it is a challenge. People say, how can you constantly land on this thing? Because every jump is different. The winds are different. This is different. The whole thing is different.
Do you like that you're competing against men and women? It's not women's category. You're kicking ass. like, I imagine you got a 30-year-old guy who's in the military, who's jumping an awful lot. And part of me thinks, who's more intimidated? I don't think you're intimidated of him knowing your record. Does that bring you satisfaction that there's parity? There's not two different divisions here.
That's what's nice about it, because that's what I don't like is the prejudice per se. Oh, you can only compete because you're a woman here or a man there. This sport here, it doesn't matter, male or female, and that's what I like about it. You are amongst everybody. There's the strength is equal. It's a matter of, it's the mentality. You know, you could win. It's like I always say, you can climb to the top, but it's harder to stay at the top. And that's where the real challenge comes in. And that's what I like about it. Yes, I won. My first world meet was, I called my mother from Zagreb, Yugoslavia, and said I won this parachute meet. I didn't even know I won it. I performed, I went through, and all of a sudden I found out I won the world meet again. And I beat all the men. I beat everybody out there. And I had no clue. I was just there to perform, but I was at the top of my game. Now, to stay at your top of the game, it's really difficult because you just can't do that over and over and over again. You're going to burn out somewhere. You're going to wear out somewhere. So now it's a matter of getting your
like a balance.
A balance. You're trying to get that balance where I take my winters off, but not too much off. Take the time off so you have that drive again, because it comes down to, I see people out there jump, and then they go and perform, and they can't perform at all because they're burned out. They're tired. They're tired of being on the drop zone. I don't want to get to the drop zone 2 weeks early, because by the time the parachute meet starts, I'm ready to leave, and now I got to perform. So it's this whole balance of when do you arrive, how much do you train, how do you get to the point of peaking. We all, you got a coach, everybody's coaching everybody out there, and these guys are all young. But now the challenge at my age, even 20 years ago, now it's learning your body and your mind of what does it take me to stay at this level when I need to be at this level. I need to be at this level this week during these 5-day period, and then the rest can go drop off to the side. And then I got to pick myself back up to be at that level again. And that's really when you really know yourself, when you can really put it there. And then how much do I jump? Where is that point of peaking right at that right time? Because it's hard. People, I'll guarantee you, if they go win a meet, this weekend, next weekend, they're not going to win it because they're on the downhill side. So what does it take for them to stay at that level that they can still keep winning? How many jumps do you do? How much time do you take off? So forth and so forth and so forth. That's where the real knowledge comes in.
How have you sharpened your mental toughness? Because with all the world records, with all the championships that you've won, self-doubt has got to creep in, going, oh, it's a little bit windy out there, or this person is doing particularly well, or, maybe I'm a little concerned about my gear. But you keep performing over and over and over again. Have you ever studied or had a sports psychologist, or where does this edge that you have come from?
I don't know. I had, when I was in the military, we had a sports psychologist come in, and they gave us all this info and stuff. And I go, well, I've done that all myself. It's like my own learning. If I could write it down, I already knew that stuff just from my experience, the way I've worked my own way of getting to where I am without them ever telling me. It was just my way of what it takes. It's like you can't get mad at yourself. You get mad at yourself, you're not going to perform. There's a whole thing of, as I say, that mental. And other people now, if you have a coach, they've got to tell you, hey, you didn't do well, or you had an out jump. Now where you really come back is this, well, I had one out jump, but I've already lost the parachute meet. It's over and done with. But you know what? I'm going to show them where I can get all dead centers the rest of the meet. So in other words, I had a bad jump. I lost the meet, but I'm still not going to keep letting myself down, and then my performance continues to go down and down. It becomes a confidence. The whole thing is not to lose the confidence in yourself. You've got to keep that confidence level up. And it's hard. It's a whole mind game. And I kind of know when I start a meet, and this is where I'm not, like last year was very difficult for me because I couldn't jump at 4 meets and I couldn't train at all. I had 20 jumps, and now I'm going into a parachute meet and haven't jumped in a year. That became very difficult because now I started losing confidence because I wasn't polished enough. And then it's like, I got a little bump. Normally I just, it's like driving a car. You don't think about stopping, putting the brake on, making a left turn, avoiding the curve. It's all natural. Well, now when you start driving, it's like, oh, God, where's that curve? Oh, I got to put I put the brake on too hard. I didn't put it on hard enough. It's not there. You're not polished. Same thing with flying an airplane. If you haven't seen it in a while, you're not polished. You don't know things that well. Everything's kind of rough. You're talking to yourself. Well, you shouldn't be talking to yourself up there when you're coming in, shooting the accuracy. Oh, I got a bump over here. Oh, the wind's shifting here. No, everything's just closed in. There's nothing, no thought process. You're just there and you're just doing it.
Cheryl, what I hear you saying is there's conscious thought as a result of not enough training, apply the brake pressure here, turn at this degree angle, and then there's flow state.
Right, flow state's a good one.
And I imagine you are so confident in your training that it allows you to become unconscious and have that tunnel vision.
Yes, that's exactly, you got the right words right there. Absolutely. And that's hard, and it's hard to stay there too. That's that peak. That's that peak level where it's all there. I can tell when we go out to a parachute meet and they're in the zone. We call it in the zone. They're in the zone. I don't care what you throw at them. They are not going to miss. I have been there too, many times. I'm in the zone, and it doesn't matter how bad the conditions are or whatever happens. I am not going to miss. And I'll be in the zone for a whole week, the whole time. Because, our meets last that long. It's like maybe one jump here, one jump there, and you got to be in that zone that whole time.
Is there one meet more than any other where you were the most dialed in? It was not even in question that you were going to win, but more of you were going to win by how many?
Well, I never, ever, ever say I'm going to win because it is a snap of the finger and I just lost it. The minute I put that in my brain, it's like a negative attitude, a negative thought. The minute I put that in my brain is the minute I've lost that parachute meet. That can't even come into my mind. Like when I recovered from my head injury, a negative thought could never, ever come into my mind because I could have never gotten back to where I am now. And that's the same thing if even though I'm in the zone, I can never have that enter. Not till the whole meet's over and I'm standing on the podium, and then I can go look back and go, okay, I was here, and yes, there's nothing that was going to stop me. But I can't say that during that time frame. Absolutely. Cannot even not say it, cannot even enter it into it.
In other words, you're not thinking of the end result. You're just going through process.
It cannot. It's just one jump at a time, and you just one jump, and that's it.
I mean, everything you say, Cheryl, is what sports psychologists say. And if you were to interview Steph Curry, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, or athletes that are generational, what you are saying is what they all say.
Yeah, because we've lived it. We've been there. Your coaches, a good coach is someone that's gone through it too, that's been there. I can relate. It's like my head injury. I can relate to people that have TBI issues. A doctor that hasn't had one, they're trained, but they really can't pull out and say what they really need to say to the patient because they really haven't been there, haven't felt it. I mean, if you've never broken a bone, then you don't know what it feels like to break a bone. I have no clue, but how can you relate to someone if you haven't been there per se? So I'm not a psychologist, psychiatrist, none of that stuff like the sports psychologist. I've just learned it on my own, learning me. I've never had the coach, so I had to learn me, figure out what it takes to perform, to be at the top.
You've mentioned, I was going to mention this later in this conversation, but we'll talk about it now, as you've referenced it a couple times, is the head injury that you sustained a few years ago. And in my opinion, perhaps your greatest triumph of overcoming it.
It is. I'm writing a book, with the help of a friend, but there's three things, in this. And it starts out, making the jumping, the flying, but the biggest accomplishment I've ever had, I have to tell you, is recovering from the head injury I had. That was the hardest. And yes, it was a shorter time, 2 years. But you know what? I'm still working on it. I still have some issues. We all, anybody that's had TBIs, really bad ones, will always have. And I know what my issues are. And it's not like mentally or this. I mean, not emotionally. It's more of learning, retaining learning, and it's a lot of little stuff.
For our audience that are unfamiliar with that accident, would you mind sharing what happened and when did it occur?
Yeah, it occurred November 11th, Veterans Day in 2014, when I was out on my bicycle, riding my mountain bike on a road through a residential area where an 82-year-old woman hit me. And she hit me, I remember the whoomph. That's all. So that's where she hit me on the seat of my seat with her mirror. But I mean, luckily I saw it come at the last second, and I was able to veer off to the right, my handlebars. Otherwise, my handlebars would have hit her windshield. I'd been killed, basically. But then I just got flipped up, and I hit my head with a helmet, luckily, but I had a brain bleed. So my head rattled inside and hit, one of those spikes in there. We have two spikes, but I had a 3-centimeter brain bleed on the right side, which got my cognitive area. So it damaged my language skill, my problem solving, my decision making. 6 months later, I could pack a parachute, but I could not pack a suitcase to go anywhere. I had to be helped for a year and a half for travel. I could not travel on my own. Absolutely. Decision making, problem solving was like out the window. Language, of course, was adding, subtracting. That all was part of language. I didn't know multiple tables till, 6 months when it was presented to me. I go, what is this? And learning root words, verbs, all that stuff. I didn't know words. I mean, I do remember. When you remember stuff back then is when a light bulb kind of comes on. But I remember asking, am I the employee or the employer? Because I had to fill out this paperwork for disability for work, but I couldn't fill out the paperwork because I couldn't really. I could read the words, but they were nothing I understood. Putting a sentence together, cognitive wise, I didn't understand that. So the lady realized I needed some help, and that's where they had an advocate to help me out. But I remember, okay, I know what I can read employee, employer, but what do they mean? I know I'm one of them, but I didn't know the difference. And that kind of stuck out, and there's a lot of stuff that stuck out. But normally I was at the severe level, just the slight severe, high moderate level, kind of in between those two, and trying to get a pilot's license back. All I knew is you can't take something I love from me, which is flying. Jumping wise, I could jump. Physically, I wasn't damaged. Yeah, my sit bone, I couldn't sit for 3 months. I had to stand up all the time, but because that's where I got nailed when I was sitting on the mirror, with a mirror nailed me on my seat. But I don't break bones, so I just damaged my bone. I got thick bones, but either way, I lived in a fog for 3 months and just kind of walked around. But then luckily I got sent to a support group through some flying friends, and they sent me to a rehab person. And this person lives in, Sylvia Whitmore lives in Charlotte here, and luckily it was close by, and she's a brain rehab person, and she challenged me. I walked in there yelling, screaming at her, per se, I don't need any help whatsoever, but I didn't realize how bad I was.
You said you were shouting, screaming, because you were super frustrated, right? Like things
I was
weren't
very
computing.
frustrated. You're at your 4-month period. I mean, my neurosurgeon says what you got in 3 months is what you got. Well, I didn't have anything in 3 months. I mean, if you said, hand me 2 oranges, I wouldn't know what 2 meant. I had no clue. I had no clue about numbers or anything. But what the problem is, you realize now you have an issue. And now I can see where these people have brain issues. When they realize they have an issue, but they don't know what to do and how to do, it's not like you need to, we need to heal your leg. It's broken. It's going to heal in 2 months. Now you realize you have a problem, but you don't know. Before you start just living in a fog. And now you're coming out of it, but now you don't have that help. And luckily I got some help, and she challenged me. I said, She said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to fly in 2 years. The problem is the airline says you cannot fly in 2 years. You're totally out. And I couldn't understand that. I said, why can't I fly today? Well, I didn't realize I didn't know numbers that could be repeat. I didn't even know anything about flying. I couldn't even fly my Airbus. There's no way. I looked at that and was like, what is this stuff, But you think, I flew. That's all you think about, but that's it, And so she challenged me, and then I says, I'm gonna do it in 2 years. And of course, all my friends behind the scenes, which I didn't know, it's like, well, if anybody can do it, she could do it, but good luck. Now, if you're out like the head injury I have, it's 5 years to come back. And I can understand that in a way. But 2 years, 8 hours a day, I worked with her 2 hours a week, twice a week. And then I did my own 8 hours a day, from math to English to listening to books on tape so I could hear a conversation, but listen to something else going on. Every hour I had a different assignment that I put myself, from Nintendo games to all sorts of stuff, to face recognitions, to get my... I had no clue what visual recall was. I finally someone said to me, well, I want my ashes spread over the lake, over the lake that we looked out over up on the bluff. And I says, oh, you mean Jasper Lake? She says, well, how do you remember that? Because I don't remember anything from my past. I says, well, I saw a map in my head. I saw a map in my head. That's the first time I had a recall of a visual. Otherwise, see, what you don't know, what you haven't lost, you have no clue until you've regained it back. That's the thing about the head injuries. You don't know what you've lost until it's come back. And so that's where then things start going. And
was it almost like a competition? Like, oh, I'm pulling things from my memory that I.
Yeah.
So one thing that really impressed me is then you started sort of retracing your history to different places or parts of your life to sort of observe it and sort of re-walk in your shoes.
I had to. I went out to Arizona and looked at the Museum of Scottsdale, and my high school's not there anymore. But then I looked up my teachers I haven't seen in 4 years. I just happen to have an old address book, and I just went to the address and I go, well, this is my old my tennis coach, but she should be 90. She's not alive, but I had the address, and I knocked on the door. No one answered. And I was about to leave, and this lady shows up in her car, hops out, and looks exactly the same, just more wrinkles, And I go, Mrs. Hensley, and she goes, Cheryl Stearns. I haven't seen her 40 years since and we got talking, and then at the end I says, now, Mrs. Hensley, were you ever married? And she goes, no, Cheryl, my name's Mrs. Hensley. And I go, oh, Mrs., that's right, that means married. And then all of a sudden she mentioned her husband's name, and then all of a sudden that drawer opened up, and I just started remembering this and this. And then I remembered our tennis team ladies' names, and the whole thing, flooded over. So I had to go to certain places to get some of my past back, because it got wiped out.
Is that still happening almost by default, that as you go to certain places or competitions?
Or people mention stuff, hey, Cheryl, remember me? No, I don't. Well, and then I'll tell them, I said, please tell me what I'm supposed to know about you. And if they can give something that opens that drawer, that gives that one little link, then it opens, it's all, and that's another light bulb that turns on. That's another memory that comes in, which is great, because that's why I say it's taken years. It's not, 2 years you can go back, okay, I could fly, but now let's talk about studying and other things. But as time goes on, more light bulbs turn on. I built bypasses around the injuries, but I'm trying to build a bridge over it. If I get that bridge over, it'll all come back.
If you're a fan of the 20-Minute Call, I'd like to personally invite you to become a member of a budding community on Patreon. By becoming a patron of the show, you can join me behind the scenes to discuss options for future guests, chat about things we've already heard, and gain access to some show swag. Details on how to become a patron can be found in the show notes. I'd love for you to join me. Okay, on with today's show. I'm thrilled to know that you're writing a book.
I'm still working on it.
When is this? When do you hope to have this book? I mean, writing a book is huge.
It's hard to say because of my time-wise. It's going to be an awesome book. It's not going to be your normal biography. It's stories that lead up, but have messages within it too. So, I have to. It's my time of sitting down, and luckily now I can record stuff and not type stuff. So I've got my friend doing the writing for me while I tell it, and then editing and all that, because I'd like to get it out soon. It was a project to getting it out, this year of downtime. Next year's more downtime. I get a little here, a little there, squeeze an hour here, hour there. But it'll be good. It's not your typical biography. I don't like and I don't need names in there too, because people don't want to read about names. They just want to read the story of success and not success, but the overcoming obstacles. There's a lot of obstacles I've had to overcome and perseverance and all that stuff. I mean, we've all gone through stuff, but then you get to the point sometimes you just give up. But see, I'm never one to give up. It's like when I made that 353 jumps in 24 hours. That was a very hard challenge because the weather just went through and it was cold. It was 20 degrees, ice all night on the Tuffet, and people are packing outside, and I can't get my team to get moving. And at 2 a.m. in the morning, they said, Cheryl, I already had 255 jumps in 24 hours. I did that 10 years prior to that. And they said, but this was accuracy. Jay Stokes now had 300 jumps. I said, Cheryl, you got to go beat Jay Stokes. I can't. That's a male record. Mine's a female record. So I said, let me put a different challenge on that. That's when I came up, let's shoot accuracy. Who's going to shoot a foil? Shooting a foil, that's hard toggle pressure. And then you got to spiral it. And it's a big, huge canopy that you got to get down in 30 seconds or less. And normally it takes a minute to get one of those things down per 1,000 feet. We're talking about per 1,000 feet. I had to be open by 2,000 feet. So at 2 a.m., I'm not even beating my 255 jump record at the pace I'm going because I can't get my team motivated.
And let's just qualify that. Your team being ground crew who are packing,
crew,
but
pilots,
also your pilot turning quickly.
Oh, my pilot's turning it where it was a problem, and getting them. And so I finally called up my friend Dave Johnson, who the airplane I have now, the 185. And he says, what's the problem, Cheryl? I says, I'm waiting on my pilot to land and my crew to get going. He says, well, you're not going to wait on me. And I says, I'm not going to wait on you. And that became a competition right then and there. Right there at 2 a.m. Plus the other deal was I was sitting in the airplane. They said, Cheryl, you got to think about this because there's no reason to go on at the pace you're going. So this is where, and I'm hurting, I'm freezing, you're hitting the wall. I thought to myself, I had this visual thing, 12 hours from now, 2 o'clock, I've got a general flying in from MacDill with the military. I belong to USASOC down there. And then I got a general coming from Fort Bragg to watch this thing. And then I've got all the media coming out at 2. I set this whole thing up because I started at 5 and I was going to finish at 5. So they're coming out to do quick interviews thing. And I visualized this 12 hours from now, me standing out on the drop zone by myself. And I saw that picture and I went over that hill. There was no more pain. There was no nothing. I said, oh, I do not like this picture. We are going to break this record. And that's where the drive came in. That's where I started screaming and yelling, you get Dave out here. You change this. You change that. I need to pick this pace up. I was on the mic, on the radio, in the plane, giving the directions of what needed to get done because this was not this was a no-go. And Dave came out. That's where he asked me, and he says, "You're not waiting on me. I'm not waiting on you." The pace started to pick up. The last 15 hours, if you look at everything's written down, every jump was less than 3 minutes, the last 15 hours. And the fastest turnaround time was 2 minutes and 37 seconds. That's from exit to exit. And it stayed 3 minutes or less that whole time. My team started to pick up. They figured out things on the bottom. We need to get her to do this. She says, "Oh, she's motivated now. we can't slow this one down." They did a phenomenal job. As I said, I get the record. I get it in the books, but it's my team that really did it. Can't do it on my own.
After you whipped them into shape, let's go.
Yeah, it took it. But I mean, they're in the hardship. I am just as much. They had 4 hour duty time. Some put in 24. Some put in a lot more. But I tried to rotate people out. It's all scheduled prior. I had about 120 folk.
120 people assisting you on the crew. How many parachutes were you using?
I had 12 parachutes, 12 full parachutes, and I had set them up, jumped them, got the stall point on them, and then when I tell people exactly the long-term effects I had on it and what I had to go through, because I've had some people from Europe ask me that they'd like to make, try this thing. Well, the most they've ever made in one day under jump is, I think I've made 15. They made 19 or something, and I go, try 352. But let me tell you, I'll give you the story of how it's done. What it's been, 95, 40 years, what's it, 95, 205, 30, almost 30 years, 29 years.
29 years.
29 years, and no one, knock on wood, no one's attempted it yet, no male or female. I tell them, and they go, "I don't think I'll do that."
One thing you're not mentioning, Cheryl, is how bad a shape you were in when you finished the record.
You have to be in awesome shape. I had, for a year out, I did 400, because my goal was to do 400. That was my goal, and I could have done 400 if I had gotten my team properly, but they hadn't worked with me yet. We hadn't done this yet. So you can't do a trial error, because once you do a trial error, you're not going to do this again. So it took them a while, so I did 400 lateral pull downs a day. I had to. You have to get the strength, and you got to have the endurance. So the working out of getting the proper endurance and legs, because now you have to launch yourself out of the plane, all this stuff you've got to do. I didn't have to pack. I just had to pack the last one, but there's a lot of wear and tear on that body, and then trying to figure out what less motions you use up there, getting the plane out of the plane, pulling the pilot chute, the whole deal.
Cheryl, I recall you also saying that from jumping into the plane all through those hours, it had literally worn a hole through your jumpsuit, and you had significant chafing. I can't remember exactly the detail.
Yeah. The thing is first of all, I had hard toggles, so I had to spiral the canopy down, and then you got the hard toggles, which you've got 20 pounds of pressure per se, in the steep area. So your hands become tendonitis. So, it's like picking up a heavy bag and you carry it and then you can't open your fingers. Well, after the fact, I couldn't open my fingers for 2 weeks because I had severe tendonitis. And then it took a year. In the morning, I couldn't open them for like 10 minutes. I had to brush my teeth with my toothbrush between my thumb and my forefinger because they didn't work. I couldn't button shirts and stuff like that because that was a severe tendonitis I got from overdoing my hands. And then it was, when you land, it was foot to butt, and then I had a tail wheel, so when the plane took off, you slid, and so foot to your rear hitting the ice, the air tuffet, whatever, it wore after 24 hours. It's like taking you along the ground and dragging your rear end on the ground, and you wear your underpants out, your shorts out, whatever clothes. I had 5 layers of clothes. I wore them to nothing. There was nothing left. They disintegrated, and along with my rear end back there. So for 2 weeks, I had like road rash, clean road rash that just oozed because there wasn't anything left of my rear end. It was just that sitting and hitting for 24. You wouldn't think that wear and tear, but it does. The harnesses I didn't have any issue there. It's the hands and the rear end that.
But Cheryl, as you say all that, it makes a lot of sense that no one else has tried to do this.
I know. Yeah, I mean, I never thought about trying to harden up my rear end back there for on the skin wise. I mean, I got everything else pretty well in shape, but the hands and the rear end took a beating.
Those are the things you can't quite plan for until you actually do it.
Right. And if like Jay and all of them who've made like 700 jumps is the real record. That's hard because you still got 700 jumps, 700 times getting in and out of an airplane. But they have softer opening canopies. Oh my gosh, mine opened like a ton of rocks because Cheryl Whitford made sure that they would open, and they opened. Because I get out at 22, but you had to be open by 2,000. I couldn't afford to go any higher because otherwise, you're cheating on the altitude and it doesn't count. So, everything's logged in for the Guinness Book. But, when you just can slide in and stand up and land and walk, it's not so much wear and tear of landing, getting up, getting down, that up and down, up and down.
You referenced Jay Stokes, who has the men's record, but really an entirely different record, different parachutes, different objective and landing. But have you all compared notes through time?
Yes. I just did the 255, which is the same land, and I landed in the pea gravel pit and slide in. And we didn't have the little parachutes. I still kind of jumped the big parachutes, but wasn't in too big of a hurry to get down. I could still say, it's got soft toggles, but you got to reach up. You got to you still got to get in the plane, out of the plane, put the parachute on. There's still a lot of, it's not easy. No. It is not. And, the time-wise is more of the time. We didn't have turbines airplanes back then. If I had a Platus Porter or something or quick turbine, I can get in, get up. The problem was we had little Cessna 182s. And then I finally said, screw the 182s, get the 185 up there and get this thing up quick and get it down quick. They didn't climb as fast. I only had an hour and a half of fuel. That was all that was allowed in that airplane. And we'd fly it for an hour and then switch out airplanes. So, and that was the max to keep it light so it can climb up. And then we had to deal with the high winds, 30-knot winds upstairs. And I had to get exactly over the certain pine tree out there in the forest, because if I spiraled, I had to spiral all the way down to 600 feet. And if you were slightly off, you didn't make it back in the pit because I had to deal with that cold front that went through. Like the
I was
winds
about
like
to say,
we have.
one thing that is almost barely you've mentioned is just how cold it was.
It was cold. It was the coldest. If you go back in 95, the coldest year was the day I made my jump. It was the coldest night, the coldest day that whole year, because that cold front went through just like we just had, where all these winds are 30 knots and blowing, and I'm going, oh my gosh. Now, if I waited one more day, it'd have been perfect, but I planned this day year out, and it was a full moon day. That was the other thing. Got to pick a full moon so you're not dealing with really night stuff. You can at least see somewhat without too much lights. You can see the ground area.
A remarkable record that I don't think, even as we hear you say it, it's hard to empathize with the fatigue, the exhaustion, the physical pain, overcoming the mental anguish, the cold. It's not going as well as you had hoped, and then come on the other side of it. It is just an amazing record.
Yeah, and when you talk about like where I hit that wall at 2 a.m. and saw that picture, and I didn't like that picture of me standing out in the drop zone by myself, all pain disappeared then. And there was nothing. And at the very end, at the very last jump, I'm just jumping in as if I'm just starting out and jumping out with no issue. And they go, oh, my gosh, 24 hours, and she can still do all of this. I mean, it's like nothing. She hadn't done anything for 24 hours. But the thing is, they all disappeared. And they said, okay, Cheryl, you got a demo tomorrow, and you've got to pack your last parachute. And I stood there. Everybody was gone except for my 5 friends that were staying at my house. And they said, come on, Cheryl, let's go. And I go, I can't move. What do you mean you can't move? They thought I was frozen. The thing is, what's so weird was with the adrenaline, and I've never had adrenaline like that, I felt this thing went from my head to my toes, a really weird feeling that like my whole blood got drained out. I just stood there and I go, well, and then I couldn't move. Honest to God, couldn't move, and I couldn't bend. And then they're trying to give me the shower and realize I have no clothes, no rear end there. And they said, she's got to warm up. And it was the adrenaline that got me through. And then when I was done, I could have jumped on a broken leg. I can understand these people in the war, how they could walk on stuff and move out. When that adrenaline goes, there is no pain, there's no nothing. And it's amazing feeling I've never felt, and I hope to never feel again, because I don't really want to go through the wall like that. You're in survival mode. I understand survival mode. So that was the whole thing about the experience, is learning that, feeling that. People can talk about it, but I've been there, felt it, and it's a hard thing to get through that wall. People say, marathon runners, they can break through the wall and stuff like that where there's nothing. But this was a different one. This was different.
Cheryl, let's talk about joining the Golden Knights. Mm-hmm. You are the first woman to ever join the team. I don't know if it was even ever considered that they would allow women on the team until you pushed the topic. Will you take us back to why did you decide or make the decision that you wanted to join the team, and then how difficult of the process was it to join the team?
Well, you're right about there was no thought of having a woman on a team back then in 77. It had been an all-male unit for 19 years before I did join in 77. But when I moved out to Rayford, I went out there strictly to get on the U.S. team, stay 30 days, and come back home, and then ended up getting a full-time job out there, flying jumpers and jumping. And the Golden Knights are training out there. So I'm living in a hangar for $20 a month, eating coconuts and sardines. I mean, that's all I could afford. And the rest of my money went to my dog, to feed her. And I'm competing against these guys, and I'm realizing, why can't I join? This is the thing. Why can't I join the Army? Well, why can't I get on the team? Well, you're female. I mean, to get on the team, you had to have a perfect military record, 250 jumps, be airborne qualified, and be a male. And that was all. I didn't understand, why do you have to be a male? See, that's the whole issue, going back again into my 6th grade. And so I go, well, just, it's one of those that was still in the back of my mind. And so it's just slowly in a 2-year period. Normally you go through tryouts, and it's a 6-week period. Well, mine was 2 years. So I jumped with them, trained against them, taught many of these guys how to fly. And they all went into aviation of some sort. And finally it came down to, talking to the commanders and the XOs and so forth. And it finally came down to, if we've got to have a female, eventually we're going to have a female. And Cheryl would be a great ambassador. So Chuck Whittle, finally convinced he can convince anybody to do anything. That's, his mentality and his personality. And he was able to convince Washington up there to accept it. And then eventually, I got on the team. But the hard part was, where I was initially going to go in 76, the commander was leaving. So I decided to not go at that time, and waited 6 months later till a new commander came in, and he was all for it. So, because you can't just join the Army to get on the Army parachute team. You've got to join to be a soldier and go through your AIT, all that stuff, MOS, and then eventually come over. So it was pretty much kind of set up, because I had guaranteed, when I enlisted in the military, I had guaranteed either duty of station or my MOS, and I took duty of station. That way I would absolutely get back to Fort Bragg. And then the Army team can then pick me up. I was a photographer. That's what was my MOS. So they said, she's our photographer. And then I was on the team as in a jump slot position. But it was 2 years of working. But it was not working. I didn't say I want to go get on the team. I just kept asking, well, Cheryl, you really are in the Army. This is just a side thing. But I said, that's all right. So I'm out running, push-ups, sit-ups. Eventually somewhere I'm going to get on this team. When I go in, I'll be physically fit and well qualified.
And were you, when you finally made it to the team, did the men in this fraternity, this exclusive fraternity, accept you?
The ones that did not accept me, which is about 5%, were the jealous ones, okay? Everybody else is still my brothers. They are my true brothers for the rest of my life. They accepted me as an equal to them, and I have to say we were a very, very good competitive team back during that time frame, because I really think to this day it was because they didn't want to beat, they didn't want me to beat them, and I didn't want them to beat me. And I didn't want to let my team down either, and they didn't want to let anything down. So it made for a really strong, cohesive team back then. It really did. We had a really good group of folks, and they treated me like, and behind the scenes, I didn't know what was going on, where they really were protecting me overseas, against the other men. Because when you go overseas over there, it's all male airborne places I went, and there were no females. We didn't have your civilian cooks and stuff like that. They were all military, so I had to sleep in a hospital room because I couldn't sleep in any barracks because I was the only female in that whole base. So it was a different thing in there, and the whole thing is my commander said, you live in a fishbowl, Cheryl, so you can't make a mistake out there. So, it's like going out with the guys. I had to go out with 2 or 3 guys at a time. Never, ever could I go out, be seen with one guy at all. And that had to be through that whole 8-year period that I was there, just so I wouldn't mess it up for any other females coming on, which wasn't a problem. But how everybody, if someone's against you, man, they'll do anything they can to destroy it so they can say and do it. So I never gave them anything that they can say anything.
Did you ever resent having to deal with that added pressure that no one else got to?
None whatsoever. I was blazing the trail. The whole thing was, I didn't even think of me as just being a woman. I was on this team because I'm a woman, because I'm on the team because I'm good. I'm an equal to them. That's the way I saw it. And I had to make sure I was an equal to them. I had equal or better. So no one could say, I could not have someone say, she could not hear this, that she's on the team because she's a woman. That didn't fly well for me. I'm on the team because I have the respect, and I'm equal to all of them. That's what I wanted to hear, of not because she's on the team, because she's a woman.
This podcast is sponsored by Beyond Marketing, the digital marketing agency for the skydiving industry. Now, I'm not a fan of lots of ads during a podcast. I mean, who likes ads? So I'll stop talking about how marvelously wonderful Beyond Marketing is. But if you're curious about what the amazing people of Beyond Marketing do to help drop zones and manufacturers thrive, then you should check out their website at dropzone.marketing. That's dropzone.marketing. I imagine, though, the respect and notoriety started to rise as you were traveling to all these various competitions and beating everybody.
Yes, and that's where down the road in a few years, then the French, the Germans, Czechs, they go, well, if they have a woman on the team and she's beating all these, then that's when the doors opened up to them. So that was the start of them recruiting women and getting women on their parachute team and training them up, realizing it's just not a man's world that can just jump here. Because all your citizen meets were just with men. So that door opened, and now when you go to the World Military Meets, it's a male and a female division.
Were you ever on the demonstration team as well?
I was on the demonstration team at the end of my season, and I did high-profile jumps. And that was where some of the jealousy would come, and I don't blame them. At the end of my season, I'd go out and I do these, high school presentations, jump where I need to be. And then I did more of your football games at the end, like in December, you get the Pro Bowls, you get the Sun Bowls, you get all those, and I would jump there. But then the big high-profile ones, like the Statue of Liberty jump or the Lake Placid, those are the ones where they used me because it'd get the publicity. Yes, when I was done, 8 years, actually to this day, this is like when I started from a high-altitude jump, 10 years ago, I was trying to get that. I went up to Washington, to the Army for their support, and they says, you're the only one here that's ever I made over saved the Army over $43 million of free advertising is what, because they calculate who does what and how much money they've saved for free advertising. Because of my winnings, the high-profile demonstration jumps, all that stuff, that's all free publicity for the military. That was the whole thing of, I'm an ambassador, recruiter, in a roundabout way of publicity, and that's what we were all about. That's what the Army team's about. It's not really about winning parachute meets. Yeah, you get your name in the paper if that's the case, the demonstrations. But, we are ambassadors and recruiting.
Cheryl, the tragedy of this podcast is that we need 5 hours to really talk about all of these different things that you have accomplished. I mean, what we're not even able to get into is you leave the Army Golden Knights or you retire, and then you have this incredible competition record as a civilian, but also become a captain for, I guess, Piedmont, then U.S. Air, and now American Airlines.
Right.
Remarkable career.
Right. Yeah, I kept my aviation and my jumping. All my hours were the same as my jumps, and then as soon as I left active duty, I went into the reserves, National Guard, and all of them were in special forces. So I got to work with the parachute teams over there, and some was a little different here and there. But I stayed in the military 28 years and retired in 2005. And then while I was doing that, I was with the Airlines for 35 years. And that was hard to get on with the Airlines because, first of all, Piedmont, I was told, tell them you've quit jumping. So when I went in for my interview, their very last question before I went to the flying portion of it, that says, Cheryl, we have 5% of our pilots are male chauvinist pigs. Maybe it's about 50% back then. And then you've got four days with this guy. How are you going to handle it? And I said, well, I spent the last 8 years in the Army, and I know when to open my mouth and when to keep it shut. And the other thing, I didn't tell them this, but the other deal is I've been working with men this whole time, so I kind of know how to deal with men also, and give them the respect that they need, but say what I need to say too, or keep my mouth shut. Then the next day I had to go fly the airplane, and they said, Cheryl, Piedmont will not hire you if you jump. So you've got to convince them you're done, because they're going to spend a lot of money, and they just weren't into that stuff. So here I am on my ILS approach, and the main big guy who's going to hire me or not, he says, well, when was the last time you jumped? I go, oh, here it comes. And this is March. This is my interview. And I says, well, it was October was the last time. And he goes, oh, so you're done jumping? I said, and that's when I took a second. I go, no, I'm not going down that road. And I said, no, I don't jump during the winter, and I take a break. But now that the spring's coming around, I'm going to start jumping. And I've got a world meet in Bulgaria this year. And I go, well, I just lost that job. He hired me. And then I met him 30 years after the fact at a reunion. He says, let me tell you my side of the story, Cheryl. Piedmont did not want you, and I fought with the other 5 people. I said, listen, she just spent 8 years in the Army. She hasn't gotten injured yet, and she's a great pilot, and she's an awesome skydiver, and I don't think she's going to kill herself. So I don't think we're wasting our money. He says, I fought for you, and here you are, So there was 2 sides there that I saw that he fought to keep me there because no one else wanted me there because of the cost of me potentially getting injured of some sort. But either way, I had a great career flying, flew captain for a while, before I retired. And now I work for Eastern Airlines, teaching the pilots on the 767. So I still keep my hands in it, and I still ferry airplanes when I possibly can, the big jets, the Airbuses, the 767s, when, this year it's kind of slacked off because there hasn't been that much. So I still fly turbine airplanes. I fly occasionally when I'm not jumping down at Chester, the Caravan, and then I own my 185 and fly that around. So I'm still flying the pistons, the turbines, and the jets, and I don't want to get my hands out of that, because once you've gotten your hands out of that, then you don't get back into it, because too many things change in aviation. It becomes unsafe if you don't stay on top of it, and I don't want that feeling of I don't have the confidence. I just don't want to go down that road. I want to keep everything up at the high level that I need to keep it at.
Cheryl, you were an inspiration. If I'm ever in a casual conversation and someone were to say to me, who's your favorite athlete? Not Michael Jordan, not any of the normal folks. For me, it's Cheryl Stearns. I believe that had you chosen a different sport, you'd still be at the top of it because of your mentality. But what I appreciate the most about you, Cheryl, is your humility.
Oh, thanks.
It is always a pleasure. When you walk into a room, you're kind to everybody. There's no ego. I know that you are a fierce competitor, but on the playing field. I'm feel privileged to call you a friend. And I would like to invite you to come back for maybe another session in a few months because there's still so much to talk about.
Yeah, we didn't even get to cover some of your questions there, but...
Oh, I mean, I have all these questions written here, and we barely got to any of them. But I enjoyed the conversation, and I hope that my audience will feel as inspired as I do every time we talk. It is just, you represent excellence at every turn.
Well, thank you very much. I enjoyed talking to you and everybody else out there that's listening.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to the 20-Minute Call podcast. Please do follow us on your podcast app so you always have the latest episode, which is released every Monday. If you want to contact the team, our email address is podcast@beyondmarketing.xyz. This episode was edited and engineered by Garnet Znydrick of the YouTube channel Blue Skies, Fun Days. Thanks for listening, and join us next week for our next episode.